Good morning and a big welcome to everyone this morning that's joining our Magnora Offshore Wind Supply Chain webinar. My name is Jaya Calder from Highlands Enterprise and I'm going to be helping my colleague Paul O'Brien run your webinar this morning. Now, before I pass on to Paul, just a little bit of housekeeping. Although you as an audience, you're automatically muted and we can't see you, my job is really to link the audience with our speakers today. So what you do have is a chat box, and throughout the whole of the session, just put in any questions, observations or whatever, and I'll make sure that our speakers actually get to see this. We're actually recording today's session, and what we do is, for everyone that's registered, we'll send you a link of the recording as well as a copy of the slides, and it's usually within 24 hours, and we'll give you the website where you can actually get those direct. So other than that, we've got a lot to get through, and I'd just like to pass over to Paul to start our webinar. Paul.
Thanks, Jaya. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another Deep Wind Cluster webinar. This one on behalf of Magnora Offshore Wind, one of our members, or one of our developer members. We're just going to show what we're covering this morning. So we're doing the introduction to Magnora Offshore Wind, who they are, and it's actually a partnership between Magnora, a Norwegian company, a developer for renewables, and Technic FMC, which should be a name that's familiar to many of you from the oil and gas sector, and now very much a player in offshore wind. Next, it'll cover off Magnora's offshore wind's ambition in Scotland, Magnora Offshore Wind Scotland application, and then John Cunningham from Western Isles Council will take you through the Arnish Energy Hub. Now, it should be obvious from that where Magnora Offshore Wind will potentially be looking at in the up and coming ScotWind round. So they are bidding into that and are looking at a number of projects in the Western Isles area. So they'll cover a bit more about that during the actual webinar. The picture that we started with, so I'll just go backwards, is one of Technic FMC's projects. Some of you will have come across it before. It's called Deep Purple, and I can't say that name without thinking of a certain 70s rock band, but I'm showing my age. Deep Purple is looking at how you would produce hydrogen offshore and also store it offshore on the seabed. So this is one of the key elements as we move forward in offshore wind, and particularly now that hydrogen has come to figure very, very strongly as an opportunity market for offshore wind. So hopefully we'll hear a bit more about that. So without any further ado, if I can ask our first set of speakers, Kirsten, Gordon, to just turn on their microphones and your video.
Yeah, thank you, Paul.
Okay, right, so we'll just move on to the next section. Now, Gordon and Kirsten were a bit concerned about a fire alarm going off at 10 o'clock, which is a test that is running in the building. I don't know if it's gone off yet, has it? No, okay. So it's probably still to come, so you need to bear with us. This is just a normal fire test. It might run for a few minutes, but we're just going to carry on. If it's too loud, okay, we might pause, but hopefully it's not going to disturb us too much. Okay, over to you, Kirsten and Gordon.
Thank you very much, Paul. First of all, I will welcome all to the webinar and thank you for joining us. We have really been looking forward to share with you our story and thoughts about Magnora Offshore Wind and ScotWind, and especially having the opportunity to get your feedback. We are also very pleased having John Cunningham from the Western Isles Council joining us. You mentioned the fire alarm, and I think for most of us in home office, we have not had so many safety moments as we used to have in conferences and others. So, and also this safety moments generally includes the fire alarm and how to exit the building. But it's also a reminder that safety is a core value. So we hope you bear with us. When the fire alarm goes off, you use the moment to take a short thought about how important safety is, and not only as of now, but also in terms of planning activities and how we deal with that. Okay, I have a picture I would like to share with you. 2 pages forward, next slide, and then the next one. During the work with our application, and due to restrictions to be home, we did our very best to learn about the area of northwest of Scotland and understand the community of Western Isles from distance. The challenge of nature and the ecological system, but only then by involving through teams. We didn't have the possibility to travel. These pictures are from our recent trip to Western Isles, and through our 2 days visit, we increased our knowledge significantly, and we learned that despite our meetings with locals, the teams, and our very best analysis, some of our assumptions were wrong. Our learnings from a 2 days trip is, however, just scratching the surface. And if we had stayed for a month, some of our assumptions of today probably would have been proven wrong again. With our ambition of creating value through sustainability in the broad understanding of the world, to succeed, we are strongly dependent of having a close cooperation with local communities, local suppliers, and experts to be a significant part of our projects. Our ambition is to be sustainable in the nature and in the communities we are in, and we are therefore happy to involve suppliers, especially those knowing the island, and we know that presence there will be crucial for our success. Next slide, please. Magnora Offshore Wind is formed by combining the strength of Magnora and Technip FMC, and the 2 companies made an agreement in January of this year. Our core business is offshore wind with related technologies, and the ambition is to create value for our shareholders, society, and communities, as I said, in a sustainable way in all aspects of that word, either it is in Scotland, Norway, France, or other countries. Magnora has an extensive experience from renewable projects developments within onshore and offshore wind, with the route to market and consenting processes. Most of you know Technip FMC as a global experience company from execution of large integrated offshore projects, floating, subsea, and industry-leading technologies. They have a strong presence in many countries, and not as kind of a huge head office, and using that knowledge both of countries and technologies and of rough environments is a strength that we really think is important, especially for Scotland. We believe that there is a perfect match between Magnora and Technip FMC going forward with the offshore wind. Håkon from Magnora and Gordon from Technip FMC will further explain the background of Magnora and the business of Magnora and Technip FMC. Now is our safety moment. I don't think it was too loud. So Håkon, I hand it over to you first. EVP projects in Magnora. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Kristin. Then I think the slide with Magnora in brief is on the screen. I can't see it, unfortunately, at the moment. But let's start. You may ask who Magnora is. Well, Magnora was formerly known under the name Sevan Marine, and I believe some of you guys know that company under this name. After selling the ENP-related technology I would call the famous FPSO, the so-called bucket in 2018. Magnora has just in a couple of years now managed to transition into a renewable energy development company. Magnora is listed on Oslo Stock Exchange on the main list, more than 8,300 shareholders. And the company then has 2 license agreements from the Sevan period, one with Shell and one with Dana Petroleum. And these license agreements provide significant revenues over the next years. However, what is as important as financial strength is access to human resources. And we have succeeded in attracting a team of experts from the renewable industry and have made some key investments we believe will shape the future of Magnora in the years to come. The initial focus, or Magnora's initial focus, was wind power development, both on and offshore. But solar PV is already a significant part of our business model. As you can see from the portfolio overview on the slide, we have made several investments within the above-mentioned technologies. You are already introduced to Magnora Offshore Wind, and you will certainly hear more about the activities in that organization during this webinar. And this area has really high focus in Magnora for the time being. I will then briefly run through the rest of Magnora's main portfolio with you now in a couple of minutes. First of all, Evolar. It's 63.5% owned by Magnora. It's a technology development company. And the employees of Evolar develop hardware, software, and control system to improve the efficiency of existing solar panels. Applying a thin film perovskite layer, that's a mineral, to conventional solar cells, the technology has potential to increase panel efficiency by 25%. And this is a concept we strongly believe in. Then let's move to Winder. It's 50% owned by Magnora, a small-scale onshore wind and solar PV developer, operating in Norway, Sweden, and in South Africa. And the pipeline is 1,200 megawatts in development. That's substantial. Magnora South Africa then, that's a portfolio 100% owned by Magnora. Wind and solar, total of approximately 900 megawatts in the development phase. Very exciting concept, approximately 600 megawatts of wind and 300 megawatts of solar. Helios then, 40% owned by Magnora, PV solar in Sweden, portfolio of 1,000 megawatts with signed land lease agreements. Promising future for that company, that's for sure. Last but not least, back to offshore wind, Kustvind, 50% owned by Magnora when all options are exercised here. 500 megawatts offshore wind in bottom fixed shallow water project in the southern part of Sweden. And this project is in the licensing phase. And there's more to come. The experience and professional relationships of our team has allowed us a seat at the table with many of the main players in the industry. And Technip FMC is one example of that. Then finally, to sum up, Magnora's business model is to identify and develop renewable energy projects from early phase to ready to build through construction and into the operation phase. And our goal is to be an international player in the market within wind, on and offshore, and solar PV. And we think we're on our way. So thank you. And next slide, please.
Okay, hello, good morning. My name is Gordon Tuch. I'm a technology director in Technip FMC based in Aberdeen. And I'm going to a couple of slides here just to take you through who we are and what we do for those of you that don't know our company. So Technip FMC is an international subsea infrastructure specialist construction We do subsea construction activities, but also manufacturing. And a lot of our traditional businesses in oil and gas and subsea oil and gas, where we manufacture dynamic risers, dynamic cables, subsea pipelines, subsea structures, trees, these kind of things. So it's manufacturing, but also installation of those products as well. And through that, by bundling both those two elements of the service, then we have a model which we call IEPCI, which is integrated engineering, procurement, construction, installation. So looking to deliver a whole field from concept level right through to construction and commissioning. And that's a model that we've traditionally employed in oil and gas, and it's a model that we want to take forward into renewable energy and floating offshore wind. We have obviously been in our traditional business for a number of years. And in the next slide, I'll talk about what we've done in Scotland and how we're positioned in Scotland. But as a business, we know that there's a need for us to transition, and having that experience, but we need to take that experience forward into renewable energy. And we have a number of elements within the renewable space that we're working on just now. We intend to communicate quite a lot about this towards the end of this year, but what we'll cover today is our interests in floating offshore wind, and we'll say a little bit more about what we're doing in green hydrogen as well. I mentioned earlier we're a global organisation. We have 20,000 employees there or thereabout, 1,000 of which are based across 3 main sites in Scotland. In Dunfermline, which you can see is part wind powered. We have a manufacturing plant where we manufacture well control systems and have a lot of high-tech manufacturing technologies, additive manufacturing technologies, and these kind of things. Evington, which just north of Inverness, which is one of the kind of iconic spool bases of the world, and seen many of the great pipelay vessels coming into Evington over the years. That there is the original Apache, so if anyone knows the detail behind that, that's a very old photograph. And we also have a premises in Aberdeen, and from Aberdeen it is the headquarters for our global fleet of vessels. We also have a number of technology and specialist R&D centres based in Aberdeen and in Dunfermline as well. What's new in Scotland is that our companies identified that there's a huge offshore renewables opportunity in Scotland, and the decision has been to headquarter our New Energies team here so that we can help our workforce transition from our traditional business into the emerging industries, and also allow us to export those capabilities that we've had and exported through subsea engineering. Traditionally, we'll be able to develop new skills here and then hopefully export them as we have done everything in the past. Could we have the next slide, please? Christine, back to you.
Thank you, Gordon. Now into the specific ScotWind application and an overview and key facts. We have submitted 2 applications, both for the northwest of Scotland, in areas in the northwest of Scotland. We believe, and our analysis shows, that there's high wind speed and high capacity factors in this area, and also it's a different wind system from the east coast and most of the wind farms in the north of Europe. Within the supply chain, we have looked carefully into local fabrication and possibility of local assembly. And this goes into what I introduced when talking about our values, being strongly integrated with the local community and use that strong knowledge of where we are heading. We have, through Technip FMC, access to UK-operated vessels for installation, and we believe in creating local labour market for the O&M industry at the Highlands. In terms of technologies, We have focused both on floating and bottom fixed technologies for these two applications. However, focus of today will be for floating. We are technology agnostic. We are searching for the best possible solution for the specific project and area. That's been our focus on this. And also, of course, solutions replying to our values. Timeline and activities in development phase. We believe that we have the option lease award during the start of 2022, of course, and our ambition is to produce early in 2030. And we think this is possible. It's a strong and a very challenging logistic activity, installation activity to make that happen in such a rough area, but engaging with supply chain and stakeholders early and in the local market, we think that is an ability to do that. Magnora Offshore Wind by Magnora and TechnipFMC are the application partners. However, we have also access to DNV, having an experienced role within wind, and also environmental impact assessment studies and technical aspects. And in addition, partners in the West Coast fabrication yards and harbors. Going forward, I think we will dig into several of these areas, and Gordon will help us out on that and give the details. Thank you.
Okay, can we have the next slide, please? Okay, so I'll take you through a bit more detail about how we intend or how we hope to execute the developments if we were successful. The first thing to say is a common question that we are focused for this round because we believe it's the right solution for the ScotWind project, is we're focused on concrete foundations rather than steel. We think that brings a lot of benefits in terms of local manufacturing and local content and solutions that can, I mean, we say here floating technologies for shallow drafts. So we've identified technologies and spoken to technology developers who can provide solutions suited for the shallower drafts available and water depths available at Scotland's ports. Our intention is that we would run the project from the Aberdeen office existing within TechnipFMC, but we would also establish project management and engineering team within Stornoway, focusing on the being close to the operational centre. So having said that, it's clear that we're focused on the north sector. We won't say which plan option areas specifically we're looking at, but they're within the north section. We also, as Paul had mentioned at the very start, we have an interest in green hydrogen with our Deep Purple project, and we see, along with the numerous challenges that there are with floating offshore wind and establishing grid scale projects within the time frame that's proposed, we also see grid connection as a big challenge. And out of that, we've retaining the option to introduce hydrogen and Deep Purple as either a partial solution or potentially as a whole solution if necessary, if the grid challenges were to persist. And longer term, our intention would be for the operations and maintenance base to be established within Stornoway. Can I have the next slide, please? Giving a bit more detail here, I think everyone's familiar with the map of the ScotWind opportunities. We're looking at two 500 megawatt applications, one of which is floating. The floating one will be based on 15 megawatt turbines, and our intention is to work with technology partners who have well-established high TRL concrete semi-sub foundations. We're showing two of them, so for those that recognize the pictures, it's UMain and Olav Olsen are two of the suppliers that we've spoken to, and both have large-scale demonstrator projects planned in the very near future, and in good time for qualification ahead of the ScotWind projects. Next slide, please. So our intention then is to build the concrete foundations at Kishorn, at the Port of Kishorn. So we've had really good engagement with Colin and Alistair there, talked about several options using the dry dock and also potential upgrades that they would do within the Port of Kishorn that would allow us to build the foundations there. I think they had an excellent animation that they've issued. I'm sure many people have seen the animation that they issued a couple of weeks ago, illustrating how concrete floating wind turbines could be manufactured there. It's not the floating wind solution that we had discussed with them, but I think certainly it's a very good illustration of the capabilities of the port. From there, we intend to manufacture and stack the foundations in Loch Kishorn and then tow them up to the Port of Stornoway for turbine installation, mounting turbines, lifting blades. We would install the big crane there. Good conversations with the crane suppliers about the cranes that are available to do these large 15 megawatt turbines and how they could be installed on in Stornoway. So lift there, and then final commissioning, final checks, pre-tow checks, and then taking the turbines out from there. Probably intending to also, well, we would use that as a base for all moorings, anchors, dynamic cables, and all other ancillary products as well. And then ultimately establishing our O&M base there. Next slide, please. And yeah, so a quick illustration of a indicative generic floating wind turbine at the proposed deepwater port in Stornoway Port Authority. So I had good engagement with them, met with them again this week and talked through the project and really positive about this. I should point out the little picture on the top there I've stolen from somebody else from another presentation that just shows the height and the size of these structures once they're installed. So there will be significant structures to be installed there. The intention is to take them through the port quite quickly. So just bringing the foundations as needed, do the heavy lift, and then take these floating wind turbines out. And I should add, I've said this before in a previous presentation, I should add that my French colleagues object to this slide because they insist that the Eiffel Tower is taller than the Shard and not as is shown there. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to flick back a little bit to talk about why Technip FMC are a credible partner in this, and why what we've done historically in subsea construction is applicable in offshore renewables as well. We've been involved in some of the biggest offshore construction projects in Scotland. The one that's illustrated here with the risers coming down from the FPSO was the Quad 204 redevelopment, where we established an operations base in Lerwick for a number of years. And we had a multiple year, probably a 4 or 5 year offshore campaign, which was limited to the summer seasons and had multiple vessels working out in a location that's actually not too far away from the area that we're looking at for ScotWind. So we have a lot of experience in establishing these kind of logistics ports and working in the harshest weather, but also being able to do the most work in the constrained windows that we see. So we think we're fit for the challenge in terms of the operations, but also in our IEPCI model, we understand that success in operations really requires success at design stage and success in manufacture, and that's why the solutions that we're proposing, we are thinking about constructability from the very first instance. From right now, before we're even successful with the license application, we're thinking about constructability, and the solutions that we would propose, we would ensure will be suitable for construction in those environments. And obviously we have a big manufacturing history as well. In Eventon, for example, thousands of tons hundreds of kilometers of steel pipe welded in the Highlands and exported all around the world. Just finished one of the most complex pipe and pipe projects ever at Eventon, which has now been built here and taken off to Norway for installation. Otherwise, we were involved with the Hywind projects. Our project teams in Norway worked on the demo, the original Hywind demo, and did the tow and installation of the Hywind spars for Hywind Scotland. We've mentioned our Deep Purple hydrogen project before, and we're also involved in a number of technology projects, one of which is in the public domain, is our investigations with Bombora into the potential for incorporating wave energy collectors into floating wind turbines. Could I have the next slide, please? Yeah, so I probably labored this a bit, but for us, local content isn't a box ticking exercise. This is home content for us. ScotWind projects are an opportunity, a huge opportunity for our business, for our traditionally oil and gas business, for our workers, for our colleagues, and for our supply chain to transition from what we've traditionally done into renewable energy. So we take that very seriously. The solution that we've proposed, foremost in our thoughts, is how we can do this here. And we've been competitive globally working here with our workforce, with our supply chain, and we will be competitive working in offshore wind with our workforce and with our supply chain. We'll do it from Aberdeen and Stornoway. We should also say that we've got other facilities around the country that could support us. We do dynamic cable manufacturing in Newcastle, for example, and some really good IP and track record around dynamic cables as well. And where there's a need and where it might support some local aspirations, then we have green hydrogen technology, which we will continue to look for opportunities to deploy, and it may form part of our ScotWind proposal. And the next slide, thank you. I think this is getting into the realms of repetition, and so in the interest of time, I'll just say that there's probably three things that for Technip FMC we think are important to us, but we also think are strengths for us. The first is a very skilled workforce and a good supply chain and a good network within Scotland that can transfer the skills we have today directly across to offshore renewables. The second one is our attitude towards technology and the implementation of technology on projects. We've got a long history of industrializing emerging technologies on projects. That's something that we've done consistently, particularly from the offices in Scotland. So we're not afraid of the technology challenge that's posed by offshore floating wind. And the third point that's really important for us is this exporting opportunity that we see it will bring. And I know that there's been a lot of debate about, well, we need to get it right here first. And I absolutely agree. We need to look after our own, our own projects at home as well. But traditionally, Technip FMC have exported a lot of engineering, a lot of product, and a lot of technology from our oil and gas basis, and we've been competitive in that. And that's what we would like to see. Having headquartered ourselves in Aberdeen, we would like to see us continuing that model that we've done in the past in offshore wind. And I think that may be me, and back to Christine, perhaps. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. Now you know much more about how we plan for possible developments in northwest of Scotland related to the ScotWind. And to make such successful projects happen, and utilizing our strengths and other strengths, we want to engage with relevant suppliers and experts as early as possible. You may ask why we should start now and not wait until we know if we have an award or not in the middle of January. However, we believe it is important to be prepared for success and to plan for that. I already said a bit about sustainability, and as our belief is that the part of having the sustainability in a much broader perspective than producing sustainable energy, we need to engage with those knowing the area and knowing the community. That's why we would like to engage with local suppliers or experts as early as possible. It's within services, facilities, and engineering. We know that the local community is very well prepared for renewables. They have worked constantly for a long time. We had the great pleasance of having John Cunningham as our host and helping us out in the Stornoway and Lewis Harris for our visit. And I'm therefore very happy that he will now go further and present of those plans for Western Isles in the next. So, John Cunningham, thank you. It's now your turn, and looking forward to hear your presentation as well.
Thank you, Kristen. I am John Cunningham. I work for the Energy Unit at Corlan and Inlandshire, which is the local authority for the Western Isles Council. Our role is really to promote the region and to engage with developers to secure benefit for the local supply chain and the community through things like ScotWind. And it's been a privilege to work with Magnora and Technip on this particular project. If I want to talk today about the Outer Hebrides Net Zero Hub, which is based at Arnish, just outside our main town of Stornoway. Arnish has a long history in energy. Some of you might be aware of the background there. But maybe next slide, please. So we're looking to build a next generation energy hub that will drive us towards our stated target of net zero by 2035. We're very dependent on imported fossil fuels, and we think that through hydrogen, through onshore wind and offshore wind, we can make that transition quite quickly to net zero. So we're going for that quite ambitious target of 2035. Current uses at Arnish, the fabrication yard is there as a Fred Olsen yard built in the 1970s. It's now leased by Highlands and Wolf. We have Hebridean Seaweed alongside, largest industrial seaweed processor in Great Britain. We have the deepwater terminal, which I'll provide some more detail on in a later slide. And we soon will have the SSEN Transmission's HVDC converter station for the long-awaited transmission link from Bewley across to the Western Isles for onshore wind principally. Planned uses are green hydrogen production, aquaculture using byproduct oxygen from electrolysis, a green data centre, supply base for ScotWind, and relocated liquid fuel storage relocated out of the town centre of Stornoway for safety reasons, among other things. Next slide, please. This is a visualization of the proposed deepwater port. This project is now out to tender for construction, scheduled to be complete by June 2023. It's been taken forward by Stornoway Port Authority with funding from Scottish Government and the local authority. In the background, you can see existing uses. The low black building on the left is the Hebridean Seaweed factory. Then the two-storey black and grey building is Harlan and Wolf's fabrication facility. And then the two grey buildings top right are the proposed HVDC converter station. And important to point out that Arnish has always been constrained in terms of fabrication by water depth alongside 4 or 4.5 meters. With this arrangement, there's a haul route round the deepwater port, and that gets a fabrication yard right into contact with the deepwater port at 10 meters depth and a channel out into the Minch and to the Atlantic. So major advantages on all sides from this new development. Next slide, please. The terminal itself, Stornoway Town Centre, top right, that's existing obviously, and Arnish Fabrication Yard, bottom centre. The HVDC converter station over to the left beside that oval development area, and then the deepwater port in the centre. That's an artist's impression of what will be there in 2023. 360 metre berth, roll-on, roll-off facility, 10 metre depth alongside, heavy lift platform, and the whole route round to the yard that we spoke about. Next slide, please. Arnish itself, as I said, built by Fred Olsen in the 70s, it's gone through a peak and trough experience in oil and gas. It was tenanted by Bifab for a long period, and we tend to get spin-off contracts from Burnt Island rather than contracts at Arnish in its own right. Now that Harland and Wolff are in position, they're transitioning to renewables, defence and shipping. It's within a 38-hectare development site. It's an enterprise area designated by Scottish Government for renewables, and there's a secured 21,000 square metre compound with purpose-built fabrication and assembly halls. And through the deepwater port, this facility has unrestricted access to ScotWind and to the Atlantic. And Albert there at Harland and Wolff is always happy to speak to any prospective developers. So Albert's contact details are there. Next slide, please. So why have we decided to get into hydrogen? I mean, we've talked about hydrogen for years in the Western Isles. If the constituents of green hydrogen are wind and water, what better place to do that than in the Western Isles? The strongest, most consistent wind speeds in Europe and the heaviest rainfall in the UK. So it's always been a no-brainer for us that hydrogen should be produced in the Western Isles, but the constraint has always been a market for that hydrogen. So we've been planning for this, but there's been no market to take hydrogen. And then we got in talks with Scottish Gas Networks a couple of years ago, and they have 5 statutory independent undertakings, basically off-grid gas plants around Scotland that are serviced by tanker or by road tanker. They are Wick, Thurso, Stornoway, Oban and Machrihanish. Now of these 5 SIUs as they're known, 4 of them run on LNG on the mainland. Our one alone in Stornoway runs on propane. Now the interesting point there is that when it comes to blending in hydrogen into the gas network on the government's pathway to decarbonisation, you can blend 20% hydrogen into LNG without even changing appliances, but you cannot blend hydrogen into propane, which means that for Stornoway, if you want to blend in hydrogen during the 2020s as directed by government, you really need to switch 100% to hydrogen. And that's how the discussion started with SGN. They have the 1,700 consumer base in Stornoway, and they're committed to decarbonisation with green hydrogen as the preferred gas. Opportunities for us are, well, for SGN, are early decarbonisation, and it becomes a national pathfinder for similar conversion schemes throughout the UK. Challenges are the capital cost of conversion of appliances across these consumers, which we hope will be supported by the gas network nationally socialised across the network. And then the differential in the cost between propane and hydrogen to the consumer. SGN do not want to charge the consumer any more for hydrogen. So we're hoping government funding will come in on a pathfinder basis to support that cost gap. Next slide, please. So we see the Energy Hub being delivered in 3 phases. The first phase from 2024 to 2027. So electricity feed to the hub would come, we hope, from offshore wind, and this is where our relationship with Magnora and Technip comes in. We see the possibility of a single deep purple platform being deployed in the Minch, just off Arnish, 5, 10 or 15 megawatts, cabling electricity onshore to electrolysis at the Energy Hub at Arnish. Alternatively, or in addition, there could be new build onshore wind, 2 or 3 turbines near to Arnish, although the area is quite heavily constrained by aviation and bird interests. That would be quite challenging. In terms of the hub itself, in the centre box, we see a sort of test campus there where we provide a service site with infrastructure and buildings and storage, and developers come in and deploy electrolyzers for their own purposes. And we have two companies really talking to us in depth at the moment. Plus Zero is our demand partner. That's a new company started by David Amos. David's business case really is based around supplying branded Hebridean hydrogen to UK festivals, and David has quite a bit of demand already signed up for that. So he would like to deploy electrolysis in the hub as early as 2024. Technip obviously would come along with Deep Purple and look to have electrolysis on site as well. In their case, they would like to experiment with seawater because their ultimate vision is marinized electrolysis. So although the electrolyzer is onshore, they would like to take a seawater feed in to test the systems there. Hydrogen storage would provide above ground, and we'd like to test the Technip seabed storage concept also at Arnish. In terms of demand, we have David Amos's +0 demand for UK festivals. He's already supplied the main stage at Edinburgh Festival with green hydrogen gen sets this year. Local authority fleet, we're looking at swapping out 4 or 5 buses on short routes around Stornoway for hydrogen. SSE are committed in the next business plan period from 2023 to replace 2 of the 10 engines at Battery Point Power Station with diesel units. And we've made the case to the SSE board that should really be hybrid hydrogen or even monofuel hydrogen, because they have the opportunity to experiment with these engines. They're not all 10 are running at the same time as a good test bed for hydrogen. And David also has very close links with a Belgian shipping company who have 11 supply ships in the North Sea running on hydrogen, and there's considerable demand there also. Next slide, please. Moving into phase 2, 27 to 29, this is where we envisage 2027 is when we envisage the SGN opportunity coming online. So in terms of electricity feed, we'll be looking by that time to have a community share in the earliest ScotWind generation, and also a community share onshore. We have an agreement with Lewis Wind Power that the community takes 20% of generation from that wind farm. So these 2 feeds into electrolysis. At the campus itself, we'll have additional ramping up hydrogen production to suit SGN's demand. We'd have a commercial seabed storage trial with Technip, hopefully, and additional above ground storage, and we'll be pipelining that gas from Arnish into the town centre network for SGN. In terms of demand, the new boxes in green, supply of the SGN network, local heat and industrial processes. I mentioned Hebridean seaweed. We have BASF Pharma on the west side of the island. Both these companies use eye-watering amounts of kerosene and electricity just to turn water into steam for their process. And we know that hydrogen can be burnt in a vacuum and produce only steam with no waste. So we're seeing them as 2 major off-takers of green hydrogen. And then the ferry, obviously West Coast ferries could be converted to hydrogen. Next slide, please. Into the final stage, 2029 onwards, this is when ScotWind is really up and running, and we have major import of generation from the ScotWind deployments. That would either be electricity coming into Arnish to electrolyse and export through methanol and ammonia, or it could be piped hydrogen, as Gordon mentioned, coming in to bypass electrolysis and just coming into Arnish to be exported through the deep-water port. The extra box, the amber box in demand, would be export to UK and European markets by container ship, by ammonia or methanol in the first instance. Next slide, please. Just a graphic of Stornoway, how the whole thing lays out in Stornoway. From left to right, we have the electricity feed offshore, onshore. Then we have a grid connection for resilience for SGN particularly. They need resilience if there's no wind for the gas network. So purely for backup, that would be all the activities we've discussed around Arnish in the centre, then the shipping routes at the bottom of the image. Top of the image, hydrogen filling stations and the various uses around the island that could use green hydrogen. Council buildings, hospitals, schools, and even the airport, where we're following the hydrogen flight project in Orkney quite closely. Next slide, please. Fraser Nash have done a study for us into the feasibility of the project, based particularly around the SGN opportunity. They asked 3 questions: is there demand, is there technology, and is there an operating model that would work? And they've answered yes to these 3 questions. They've given us some scenarios at the bottom. Heat-led is the SGN opportunity. Transport-led would be wider transport, and then into major export. But some of this has been superseded by the new Technip opportunity early in the game from 2024 onwards. Next slide, please. Eustace, I've mentioned some of these who would use the hydrogen. Well, the salmon hatchery would use oxygen, and then bus fleet, refuse collection fleet, BASF Pharma, Hebridean Seaweed and Arnish would all use green hydrogen, as would SSE in the power station. Next slide, please. The TechNip solution, I'm not sure if Gordon shared this particular image, but this would be the platform we'd hope to see off Arnish, wave converter in the base of it, and then one turbine on top, connected by private wire to the energy hub at Arnish for electrolysis. And we now have a pathway through consent through Marine Scotland's latest announcement that off Arnish is one of the areas to be allowed for this sub 100 megawatt innovative project under the INTOG leasing round. Next slide, please. Just finally, we've been approached by Green Data Center Consultancy. They looked at Arnish. Arnish ticked all the boxes. It's secure. There's hectares of available land. There's any amount of power available now and into the 2030s, and next generation fibre is available. So again, an opportunity that's coming to Arnish possibly. Doesn't create that many jobs locally, but the kudos of having it and the demand it's going to bring for electrolysis is really going to drive developments elsewhere in the supply chain. Next slide, please. And just to close very briefly, just to say that as a council, we've seen developers come and go. Some come to us and they tell us what they think we want to hear, or they're ticking a box for Crown Estate Scotland. But I have to say genuinely that Magnora and TechNip have been really excellent partners. They've engaged with us early and often. They've taken time to understand the local culture, the unique values and culture of the Western Isles. They've visited us, as Christian said, and they've engaged directly with the community. And we've worked together on some very innovative projects which are into the statutory system through the assessment of ScotWind, but they're there as a voluntary memorandum of understanding between the local community and Magnora TechNip. Some very interesting, innovative projects which will create long-term value in the community and an enduring legacy. So if anybody watching wants to see a model of how to engage with the community, you do worse than to look at Magnora and TechNip. They've been really excellent partners. So I'll close there. Thanks very much.
Thanks, John. Ringing endorsement there at the end. Well done. Can I ask all of the speakers to now just put their cameras back on? So John, if you leave your camera on, Kirsten, Hakon, and John. Okay, right, we're going to go into the Q&A session now. As you can imagine, we've had a few questions. One of the first ones up was something that I think it was Gordon that said earlier on, talking about the potential for fixed and floating. But the question was more around, will the sites that you're looking at be hybrid sites, or are they separate? Is one floating, one fixed, or are they potentially hybrid? Kirsten, you want to take that?
Yeah. For ScotWind, we have not hybrids, but for other places, we are definitely open for hybrid sites. Our core is opportunities where we can use our strengths and our technologies, and that is our core. But for the ScotWind, we are not on the hybrid now.
Okay, right. Next question was on your supply chain development statement. On the submission, what are the areas of development identified in order to meet your ambitions for local and maximum supply chain impact? I think you've probably, this was an earlier question, you probably answered some of that, but if you want to speak to that as well, who wants to take that one? Okay, Kirsten again.
Yeah. As Gordon presented, we plan for establishing project office both in Aberdeen and in Stornoway. And first step is to get a good knowledge of possible suppliers and services related to the consent activities. So that is our focus from the start.
Okay. Now the next question, I'm not quite sure what this actually means. Hopefully you guys will. Are you open to F to F? That's a new one on me. I'm not quite sure what that means. F to F. Discussions with interested suppliers, e.g., having experience on high wind tamping. Gordon, that sounds like one for you.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think suppliers with specific relevant experience to floating offshore wind, we would definitely be interested in having that conversation. We had the address on an earlier slide, the email address. So I think the thing to say there is for suppliers to use that email address to contact us. We'll review everything that comes in and respond to those to all inquiries. But yes, where there's an immediate clear experience and an immediate priorities, then we can have face-to-face meetings for sure.
Right. Okay. I should just confirm with the audience that we are not only recording this session, which will be on our website shortly within the next couple of days, but we'll also make a PDF copy of the presentation available as well, providing everybody is okay with that. So once we've got your nod that the content is okay, we'll PDF it and upload it to the site as well. Okay, next question. Interested to hear your plans for environmental assessment and environmental impact assessment works, and would be keen to know how we could get involved in that.
It's possibly the same answer again, really. So for the environmental impact assessment, it's one of the first and the earliest supply chain engagements we'll need to make. And again, those with skills, particularly those that with good knowledge of the area, should contact us at the email address, and we'll be in touch in due course. As Christine said earlier, we want to be prepared for success, so we will engage with companies, particularly for this consenting phase, as early as possible.
Okay, we've got a further question just about job numbers, saying the operation and maintenance space that's been mentioned at Stornoway, what sort of job numbers would be linked to a 500 megawatt project? Who's wanting to take that one?
It's hard to be specific. We have discussed that up and down. Like, is it 10? Is it plus minus? We struggle because that's dependent on the solution. We would like also to be highlighting that it's not only about that. ScotWind is the first step in the development, and we're building through our plans. We think we're building also competence and expertise in the area in terms of project development. And our hope, and we believe that is how we understand at least the Scotland ambitions, is that this will not be the first round of offshore wind. So I think it's a much more significant number by having new rounds, new applications and awards that will give a continuous production at the yards in the area, both in Stornoway and also Kishorn and other places in the area. So yeah, it's not a huge number in the O&M phase, we believe, but the ability to work further on new rounds, that is where we believe there will be a lot of effect on the workload. Maybe you will add something, Gordon, to this.
No, just to reiterate what you said, and we do hope that this is the first round of ScotWind that we would be successful in, and that there would be subsequent ones, and this is just not a one-off construction project and then leave the area, that there could be multiple ongoing 500 megawatt developments for a number of years, and therefore the capex construction work will probably, that would last through the 2030s, would kind of dwarf the O&M roles as well.
Okay, right, we're running out of time here. I think we've just got time to ask one more. There's a question surrounding the rough timelines for structures leaving Kishorn, arriving at Stornoway, and understand all this at the pre-planning stage now. So rough timeline for structure leaving Kishorn, arriving at Stornoway, and I'm assuming then going out to the site.
Yes, so that's something that's going to happen over a number of seasons. And we anticipate the operations work being over for this phase, for this initial project, if we were successful, to happen over perhaps 4 years, potentially a preparation year, some early manufacturing at Kishorn, but then 2-year process of the foundations being moved up from Kishorn through Stornoway and out to field.
Right, okay, Gordon, thanks. Now, unfortunately, we are out of time, so I'd just like to thank all our speakers from Magnora, from Technip FMC, and from Western Isles Council. So thank you very much. A big thank you to the audience for participating. As I say, we will upload this, the recording, to the website. We will add on a PDF once all the speakers agree that that is okay. We'll check that with you. And hopefully, as we were just saying, this is only the start of a conversation with Magnora Offshore Wind and the supply chain. So thanks again, everyone, and hope to see you all next time. Bye for now.
Thanks, Paul. Bye.
Yeah.
Thank you.